This episode of Kind of Funny Gamescast is brought to you by Movement Watches. Movement Watches was founded on the belief that style shouldn't break the bank. We're talking classic designs, quality construction, and styled minimalism. Perfect for any occasion. Movement figured out that by selling online, they were able to cut out the middleman and retail markup, providing the best possible price. Greg has his, and now he has a sexy-ass wrist, and he's never late. Get 50% off today with free shipping and free returns by going to movementwatches.com. That's MVMTwatches.com/kinda. Movementwatches.com/kinda. Join the movement. Did you like that one, Kev?
Yeah, I really like this sexy ass wrist.
Next topic. You. The dark night of news. I want to talk about news at IGN.
Okay.
So I worked with you for 5 years, give or take.
Ish,
a little
yeah.
bit. Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
You were there the whole time I was there, weren't you?
Well, I mean, I left. So I worked with you from probably 2012 to 2014.
Oh, okay. So
And
fuck.
then-
Well, I was way off.
Well, because then I left
I
and came
never
back.
worked
I guess actually, no. I guess I was there before you, and then then you left.
No, I started.
Because I was there in 2010.
Oh, so you were there for me, yeah. Because
Yeah.
I started as contract in like August-ish of 2011.
Okay.
And then I became full-time in October of 2011. And then I was there until February 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Left for 13 months. Came back in May of 2015.
So you were doing news.
Yeah.
Then you came back to run news.
Yes. Yeah.
So okay, what does all that mean? And what does news mean at IGN?
So we divide things. A long time ago, we had content teams, like divided by the content type. So PlayStation, Nintendo, PC, all that. And then now we did it instead by, rather than content in terms of manufacturer, we have it by content like previews, reviews, news, features, are kind of our four big verticals. And so I run the news part of that, executive editor of news. And then I have a counterpart for previews, reviews, and features.
So when you being in charge of news, is that news in terms of article and video?
Sort of. So it's like news is like this weird foundation where, I oversee the news video team, and then the fix is sort of separate from me, but I still work with those guys a lot. And I guess if the fix has like a huge mistake or problem, that's probably ultimately on me. But like we basically do it as, like announcements, press release, blasts, things like that, and things announced during press conferences are all news. And then we consider. There's this gray area that other sites call a report, which is sort of a newsy feature, which would be kind of like a long-form interview or things like that. That becomes more of a gray area, but it's still pretty much under me, unless it becomes much more like big picture focused.
So for people out there that read video game news every day, they go to the IGNs, the GameSpots, wherever, or Kotakus, and like kind of just read through all the articles that were written. That's where they get all of that. Where do you get the news?
Mostly directly from publishers. Like we're obviously getting press releases and every morning checking PlayStation blog, Ubisoft blog, like all that stuff for announcements that go wide. And then other things that we get exclusively that we either negotiate for or pitch for, or that come out of, IGN first. Maybe we go somewhere to see a game, and then while we're there, they're like, oh, by the way, we just started working the sequel. And then we have a story like that. It's kind of, news is a weird thing because it's unpredictable, right? So like I come in with like 10 things I'm expecting to do that day, but then if there's a major announcement like surprise, we announced a sequel, or really unpredictable things like a death or a major person leaving a company or things like that, we kind of have to stay on our toes. Mm-hmm. So I think where do I get the news? Kind of from everywhere. I am constantly looking at Twitter, looking at Facebook, reading through blogs, looking at my inbox. We get tips from people. It kind of comes from everywhere, and it's sort of feels like a little overwhelming at times, like kind of looking down the barrel of that gun and thinking about like kind of the triage of like in the moment, like what is the most important thing and what are we focusing on? And all of that is just sort of the aggregation side of it. And then there's also the generating original news. So the conducting interviews and being proactive about if someone does announce something, how are we following up and who are we on the phone with to be like, well, what else can we get out of this? And what is so this is what you said in the press release. What did you not say? What are our questions still? It's stuff like that. So it can be little daunting, but there's a lot to it.
So NeoGAF is kind of the biggest video game website where I'd say the most people interested in video game news and industry side stuff usually
They're looking
are.
for the scoops, the
They're looking
rumors,
for the scoops.
That
So I
Reddit,
feel like
yeah.
leaks.
and Reddit as well.
Yeah.
But they're kind of doing all the work themselves because they want to be doing it. How often does IGN get news stories from NeoGAF?
Well, I mean, I would say like the experiential things, like so whatever. Why can I not think of a multiplayer game? But Call of Duty launches and like there's server problems, or there's, oh my god, if you choose this obscure combination of classes, like you actually can't connect, but everybody else can, or things like that. Like the things that only come from gameplay, that is where Reddit and NeoGAF are incredible, because they, just by virtue of the volume of people, are going to encounter things that we might not encounter. As far as like seeing a blog post first or something, like, we're if we're doing our jobs right, are seeing that at the same time they are. So if a NeoGAF thread pops up, a lot of the time it's like, oh, like Mass Effect Andromeda has been delayed. We might have known that under embargo from EA. We might have just seen the blog post at the same time they did, or the tweet, or wherever the source was. Or maybe it was even said on our show, or maybe it was said on a GameSpot show, and so we have to source that. Like, I think GAF just kind of has a wider set of eyes than we do. But for the most part, like, I would say it's rarer for us to find out something from them than the opposite.
So you mentioned getting tips earlier. How often does that happen? Because what is that, like an email address or something?
Yeah, so we have just news tips at IGN, or I have my DMs open, and that's a lot of the like, hey, I work at GameStop and we heard about this, or hey, like I just got laid off from this publisher and like we were at the time doing this, and I'm really frustrated. Like we'd love to show it off and stuff like that. And I think we're doing a little less of that than I think we were when I was more in the trenches. It's something I want to kind of get back to. Like, I think like the Jason Schreiers and Patrick Klepeks of the world they are dedicating so much more time and resources, but they're also just better at sniffing for that stuff. And so like they have a lot of like really cool scoops and things that I feel like we still love to get when we can, but we're doing a little less. But that stuff, yeah, it'll come from, like fans of the shows who because they know us and like us, will decide to share something with us, or people who are devs, or people who just tell us things in confidence that we're not necessarily reporting on, but that we can kind of keep kind of in our back pockets, and that we know, and that provide context for other announcements and things like that.
How do you kind of balance that, like the ethics of reporting the news, but also not betraying the friendships you have? Like specifically, you're talking about like, oh, if you were to go to an IGN first or something and you find something else there, do you run that stuff by them before you write the news article?
It would depend. I mean, like if they invite us into their house and we like see something we weren't supposed to see, we're not going to like take it and put it in our pocket and just run it. But in different circumstances, like if we find out something that, an ex-employee tells us, or someone, their sister works there and told them something or whatever, like we'll verify that information, but maybe it is something that we run that maybe the publisher wasn't ready to announce, or, like way back in the day, we heard about the Telltale Game of Thrones game before Telltale had announced it at the VGAs that year. And we, double confirmed it and made sure it was real. And then we ran that news ahead of time. Like occasionally I think that can make publishers mad, or like you hear Jason from Kotaku talking all the time about like the things they've run into with being blacklisted and stuff like that. I think it's kind of a balance, right? It's kind of like, how important do we feel that information is? How confident are we that it's legit before we, run it and hurt our own reputation or mislead our audience or things like that?
Where do you come down on the ethics of leaks? I think whenever we talk about a story on the morning show of this is, Destiny 2's leaks or whatever, blah, blah, there's there's not rumors, there's comments of like, oh, this sucks for those people. And not even Destiny 2, because that's just whatever, a GameStop, you're ahead by a few days. But when it is like that time that guy snuck in, just walked into an office and like walked up and ate lunch and
filmed,
and like wandered around and just found everything. I forget what game that was. It was up north, but like,
or all the Kotaku Assassin's Creed reveals and things like that are, I mean, like ethics is the word for it, right? Like I think if you like stole it, if someone like hacked into a network and illegally got it or something, that's not great. I think there are a lot of reasons people do it. Like, for example, like, and I was like very briefly in a marketing capacity on the dev side. So it's like, it's weird for me because like I've seen how hard people work on things that we take for granted, how a texture that you probably walked by and didn't notice might have been 3 months of someone's life that they didn't have dinner with their kids and that they, like really sacrificed for. And so I get why sometimes that's at odds with maybe the PR plan for a game. And if you're a dev who worked really hard on something and then it's not going to be announced for another year and you're like, oh, I just want it out in the world. Like, I get why people would be motivated to talk to the press and would put that out there. I think when they introduce that stuff to us, if they bring it to us and we verify that it's real, I don't consider it unethical. I think it's our jobs. You know, if we know that information and we're positive it's true and we think our audience will find it interesting, like, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to put out there, because like my job isn't to maintain Ubisoft's PR plan. Like that's just not what I do. That said, I do think there's like this weird, like when I first started in this job and I would find something that someone put on LinkedIn that they weren't supposed to, like I would like lose sleep over running that story. Like it made me feel like the most awful person to be like, you put this out there and you weren't supposed to, and I put it on fucking IGN and now it's everywhere. And like that person, like we would have those situations where someone would be like, hey, can you take down this story? Like I wasn't supposed to say that. And it's like, well, no. Like,
genie's out of the bottle on that one.
Yeah. And so it's like a weird, I mean, I don't, you know, it's not like I like, got another one or something. Like, it's not like I take pride in that, but it's also, I don't necessarily consider it unethical to draw attention to that information that was publicly available.
Is it a fine line to walk to go from you're doing the leaks, this is what it, I mean, you confirm that it's real, but then like you said, you know, it is PR blasts from people. It is there are the connections.
I mean, it has to be case by case, right? Because I feel like it's so, if you put a blanket rule over it, I think it becomes a lot harder in situations like, so like one of the weirdest things is like when like, not even necessarily us, but like the press reports on layoffs and the people of that company don't know yet. And it's stuff like that where I think those are where you get into really weird gray areas where like, if you know that like the head of a company just left and things are looking bad, or like if you were to hear about the irrational layoffs before the employees knew, like it puts you in this weird position, you know? And I still think like moving on that info, if you're positive it's true, I don't think necessarily makes you evil or awful or doing anything bad. But man, does it put those employees in a crappy position, and man, does it put their bosses who were, you know, it's 9:56 and at 10 they were about to announce it. You know, like there's obviously always going to be areas like that are complicated. And I think news is like, you know, I talk about coming in with a to-do list, and then the 9 things I thought I would do that day, I do 10 other things instead. I think in that same way, it is sort of, we never know what's going to kind of fall into our laps or what we're going to figure out, and then it's kind of evaluating, well, what do we do with that? And is it, you know, I do think that there's a point where like, if you're really going to burn a bridge with it, like you better make sure you're right. Cause I do think there have been plenty of embarrassing moments in plenty of outlets' histories where like they did get something wrong. And I don't know, like, I think that puts you, it in that way, I do think you have a responsibility to your audience to fact check and to verify and to make sure you're doing it right.
So with the verification, like what does that even look like? So are there certain sources, like I imagine PlayStation Blog and the Xbox Wire or whatever it's called.
Oh, which are obviously like official channels.
And so if you get that, that's just cool. This is fact. We're running it. But what if it comes from any other source? What does the process look like?
Yeah, an official channel, obviously, like I guess like the PlayStation Blog could get hacked, or like a verified Twitter account can get hacked, and you'll see stuff occasionally that like, oh, that's weird, or they made a typo or whatever it is. Occasionally that stuff does happen. If someone emails us and they're like, hey, I work at Nintendo and I have Metroid Prime 4 footage I want to show you. Like, it then becomes like, okay, like, prove it. You know, like number one, like my priority is like, I want to see it and I want to talk to that person and I want to make sure they like, what do you have to show me? Like, let's look at it. But I want proof of that them being who they say they are. And sometimes that's not even something we'll publish necessarily, but like we have to see, like, verify your employment and all of that. Separate from that, we then have to like, someone giving us an asset is hard because that's a harder thing to verify than I think information. If someone tells you something, trying to find another source to verify the information is a little more straightforward as opposed to like showing someone a video and saying, is this real? Mm-hmm. It's a weird boat to be in though, where you have to make sure, like, sometimes information will come out or someone will tell us something and then we want to verify it, but maybe both of those people we're talking to are getting their information secondhand, and maybe they're even getting it from the same person, and that person misheard it in the first place. So then we think we confirmed something, but really you didn't. You just had one guy who misheard someone else on the phone or saw something over someone's shoulder and misread it, and he tells you, but then separately he tells Greg, and then you two are talking to each other, and then you two are separately talking to me. Like it's this weird game of telephone where, like, I think at this point, especially with like fake news and everything being what it is, I would err on the side of really like overly cautiously double checking anything before I ran to this point if it's not from something official. And I think it puts us in a tough spot because sometimes we hear about stuff early and then it gets announced and we're like, oh man, we knew that. Like we could have gotten that scoop, but I don't really regret it because I also don't want to be in the other side of the coin, which is we are confident enough to run this, and then we're wrong, and then you're dealing with the backlash of that.
So talking about the official channels, like sometimes I've noticed, even if it is an official channel, especially when you start looking at the worldwide point of view of it all, like, do you kind of take certain things as more credible than others? Like in terms of like an example I have is recently the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. They still are being really cagey on, is it exclusive or is it not exclusive? They haven't come out and actually said it. And then PlayStation, I don't know, Ireland or something.
Yeah.
Tweeted like, oh no, Crash Bandicoot is exclusive to PlayStation, and then NeoGAF exploded with it like, oh, they said it's exclusive, and it's like, I don't believe that as a user, you know. But what would you guys take from that?
It's hard because like I say official sources as though everyone knows what that means. Like I think for me, there's definitely kind of this hierarchy, right, where like the actual PlayStation blog or the words coming out of Sean Layden's mouth on stage during a press conference, you're good to go. Like something that is sent to us from Sony in a press release, you're good to report on that. Like those are generally going to be okay. A release date on Amazon or GameStop, maybe not as set in stone, because a lot of those things are placeholders or a lot of those things are old info. And then even less so when you get into like international affiliates, like even us, even IGN, for example, like we have the sites that publish to IGN.com, which are our US office, our UK office, our LA office, and our San Francisco office. And then we have these franchisees that are international. So like there's IGN Benelux and IGN France, IGN España, and these companies that they're the IGN name and they're, part of our global push. If we have an exclusive, we can put our stuff on all those sites at once, but their editorial staff operates autonomously and isn't dialed into us. I think that can be true of PlayStation and Nintendo and everyone else, that like what comes from, PlayStation Ireland might not have come from the mothership, or it might be a contracted social media agency that some customer service guy just thought it was exclusive and said it, but didn't actually get that information directly from.
He thinks he's
mouth.
answering a simple question, and it turns out this isn't simple at all. It's similar to like Agent M on the Marvel stream recently this week, right? Where he's like, "Oh yeah, and Spider-Man's coming to PlayStation 4 this year," and Insomniac's like, "No, there's no release date yet." And it's like from us having covered this, worked in this industry, you understand how that happens. That Agent M, who's on every Marvel thing ever, I'm sure he's not up to date on every Marvel video game release, as well as the comics, as well as this, as well as the movies.
Yeah. So the Amazon release date thing. So that happens all the time. And most of the time it's like December 31st, whatever that year is.
It's usually tied to a
like
court. Like if they've said summer, it'll be whatever, June 1st or July 1st.
But let's say that you today, note like someone sends you a tip or whatever. And it's like, hey, look, whatever game, I don't know, like Spider-Man has a release date of September 21st. Like something that is a little bit more random.
Poe's birthday.
What would be the process there of how you would handle that?
I mean, part of it is just common sense, right? Like if it's a Monday or if it's a holiday or Sunday or whatever, like it's going to be immediately, we're going to be like, okay, like that doesn't sound right. Or if it's like tomorrow, stuff like there are little things that are immediate red flags. If it's a Tuesday and it's within the range, then maybe we hunt around a little more, look at what they've said. And like that's how the Mass Effect release date was out there for so long that the Dark Horse art book, months and months before EA officially announced it, had that release date out there. And we did report on that because that was a partner of the publisher who clearly had gotten some kind of information and it seemed accurate. So we reported on it and we're careful with our words. It's according to this Amazon listing, according to Dark Horse. And we also reach out for comment. We don't, like one of the things, the laziest thing I think you could do is if a Ken Levine or a Jeremy Dunham or whoever tweets something about their game, isn't it weird?
Yeah, it's always weird to say Dunham and be like, about the game.
If they say something on Twitter that seems, whoa, that's surprising, or whoa, that's out of character, or whoa, they're really negative about something, reporting on that without reaching out, I think would be irresponsible on our part. Because I think that we, by virtue of being IGN, have those avenues where we can say, hey, people are freaking out over this tweet, like, what did you mean? Or did you mean this how you said it? Or like, let us clarify, blah, 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 blah. I think with retailers, there's a little less room to do that. I can reach out to Amazon and be like, hey, where'd you get this September 21st release date for Spider-Man? Probably going to get an automated response or nothing. I can reach out to PlayStation. I can reach out to Insomniac. Probably going to get a no comment. So
we don't comment on rumor and speculations.
Exactly. So at that point, it's hard. I mean, at that point, it does become more of a gut feeling. And we've run plenty of things like that, and then it gets updated and removed. Or Insomniac does 6 hours later say like, hey, like that release date's not right, September's not right, we haven't announced anything. And then, we'll update our story and put a correction or put that in. So it does get into that area where a lot of it is just instinct after having done it for a while, where like sometimes you see a date on Amazon or GameStop and you're like, that feels right.
Yep.
Or sometimes, I mean, it's hard if we already know. That's the even harder thing, is like if we've been told off the record a date and then that date leaks, it gets complicated too, because like we can't use the information that we've been given to influence our reporting. So we still have to treat it as though, well,
Take it with a grain of salt, but this person's saying.
Exactly. Or just, treat it as like, let's still go down the rabbit hole of, let's go to the official site. And there have been completely bizarre cases where like the actual Nintendo or PlayStation site will put a release date quietly on the product page that hasn't been announced yet. And sometimes someone digs that up. Or sometimes it's on PSN. Like the Telltale Guardians of the Galaxy date was appearing on PSN before it had been announced. There's definitely weird little examples like that where, sometimes it's legit. And sometimes maybe we passed on it and we shouldn't have.
So that's interesting. This is something I've never had to deal with. If you get embargoed information, like say some like Insomniac like says to you, hey IGN, Spider-Man's release date is September 21st. And you can't talk about that until July.
Yeah.
Then you hear like someone else confirms it and it gets confirmed and all of that, and you've confirmed from other people. Are you still under embargo there?
Yeah, so it's a weird thing, right? It's in a perfect world, we keep that information on kind of this need to know, where it's like if we know what the release date is, like I'm probably going to know it, and then whoever I signed to write it under embargo is going to know it. But ideally, like Jose and Brandon and Miranda don't know, so that when it leaks, they can write that story and source wherever it came from and write like, oh, Amazon says September 21st for Spider-Man. Even if Jonathan and I know that's true, like they're sourcing Amazon, taking a screenshot, and I don't think that's violating embargo because the information's out there and they're saying according to Amazon.
James Stevenson at Insomniac is like, stop using our game as a fake example. Stop saying September 21st. God damn it.
If that is a thing to
Watch
date.
the news sites report. According to the Kind of Funny Gamescast.
Take it with a grain of salt, but they sure were hung up on September 21st for Spider-Man.
Then there's the weirder things like like the Final Fantasy Uncovered event or whatever. Like when something comes out ahead of time, like like we wrote like, hey, according to this leak, this is the case. But then we wrote that night, hey, this was officially confirmed now. Or like same thing with the Destiny leak for Destiny 2. Hey, according to these posters, Destiny 2 September, blah, blah, blah. And then we run a separate story. Bungie officially confirms Destiny 2 release date. So I think it just like, I think the most important thing to distill for us is that provenance of a story, is that source, is where is this actually coming from when we put something out there, because like, it drives me insane, even on the Kind of Funny and beyond Facebook groups, when I see people like, oh my God, like, I can't believe that Wolverine's going to be in Iron Man 4. And it's like, like marvelmovienews.org or marvelmovienews.tumblr.com. And it's like, you can't trust that. But at the same time, like it's, it would be naive of me to think that everybody understands that distinction, and I'm sure what those people do would mystify me, and I wouldn't understand pieces of it.
So last question I have, and this kind of has to do with a lot of people listening now. How many people, so obviously there's all the people that work at IGN and most of the editorial staff writes news articles in some fashion, right?
Yeah, for the most part, we have a kind of a rotating news shift. So it's like, every Wednesday, Jose's on news duty, and every Friday, Miranda's on news duty, and we'll have people kind of, for a set chunk of the day, just keeping an eye out. And whether that means writing stories on their own or just editing and publishing stories that freelancers have written.
Like, did you have to do news when you were
back in the day? Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah,
When you were on the PlayStation team, you did a lot.
Yeah, that was the thing. Is like news is I've seen news evolve, and that's why I'm just letting Goldfarb talk, because obviously we have no idea what it's like there anymore. But I remember when it was. I came in right after David Adams left, and I'm pretty sure he founded the news team with Damon and Kathleen, right? And that's why Scoop was a thing or whatever. But that was in the day where it was like, oh, Bethesda put out this press release. All right, news team, put it up, and they just put up the press release.
Yeah,
you know
they used to put up raw ones. Yeah, that's right.
And it was just how that was at the time, and then it slowly evolves into this, that, and the other, and talking to people and getting sources. And
yeah.
So in addition to the editorial staff, there's also a team of contractors. How many people do you have working for you for news, and how do you kind of vet who is credible?
Yeah, it's weird because we have news is interesting because I would say it's the highest turnover for freelancers because it's like we pay per story. So we don't pay like a flat rate or salary or anything like that for our contracted freelancers. So it's a volume game. Like for us, it's like if you write a ton of news stories, like you can do well. But I remember freelancing, like if I had the chance to be making, a small amount per story, versus writing guides for, $500,000 a pop for some other site. Like, I totally get why people will occasionally leave an IGN News freelance gig to go, as in knock the mic over, to go do something else. Like, that makes sense. And so I think we have kind of a constantly turning staff of like 12 to 20 solid news freelancers across all the different time zones. So some work with our UK team. We're slowly building back up the Australian freelance team. And then the majority of our freelancers are on East Coast or Pacific time.
So since it sounds like it's more of a one-off basis thing because it's per story, it seems like an easier way to get into games media.
So for the longest time, I think the foot in the door at IGN, the way I did it, the way like Hillary Goldstein did it, the way Colin did it, a lot of people was through guides. I think guides and now wikis are still a pretty good way to start contributing.
So Jared did it too, right?
Yeah, for sure. And Marty. I mean, like there are a lot of people who started by doing strategy guides, and it was a good foot in the door. And with wikis, it still is because you can, if you kick ass making wiki edits, like they'll notice you and they'll bring you on for freelance and stuff like that. I think news has become a really good alternate path to that. But news is very different. Like it's at least the way we do news. Like I like to keep opinion out of news. I see news as sort of the foundation of all of the other content we'll do. So like I remember back when the I think it was Dead Island. I forget if it was Riptide or just Dead Island had like the special edition that was
the
like
bust
a
that was
gross
just
torso. It was like just like no head and just like a bikini on boobs, and it was just like a body. And we had this like debate in the office of, well, do we run this as like literally like do the Kotaku style headline of like the Dead Island Collector's Edition is fucking gross, or run it with an opinionated headline, or do you say Dead Island Collector's Edition announced, stick to the facts, and then use that as a launching pad for an opinion piece that is, hey, the Dead Island Collector's Edition is fucking gross. And for us, it's the latter. For us, it's like we will get straight news out and then follow up with opinion, follow up with a video talking about why we don't like it or something like that. There's occasional gray areas where something happens where I think it's okay to put a little bit of speculation into the story. Like, for example, the release date example we were talking about. Maybe you say...
You mean Spider-Man coming out on September 21st?
September 21st, worldwide. Also to Xbox.
Take it with a grain of salt.
And the Nintendo Switch.
I think we'll say, hey, take this with a grain of salt because this is 6 days from now, and Insomniac probably, like we'll put context in cases like that. But we play news pretty straight.
Okay.
My question would be twofold, I think, is right now, do you think that there's a problem with journalism? That's a thing that gets thrown around a lot. What is it to you, and how do you guys avoid it?
I mean, I think part of it is the volume of things being announced every day is like staggering, and like keeping up with all of the games coming to mobile, all the games coming to PC, and also giving our audience what they care about. Like to be honest, like there's this like kind of cynical, like, oh, they're just doing it for the clicks mentality. I think when people run news, especially news that seems, sensationalized in some way. But like we pay attention to what our audience likes.
Sure.
And if our audience starts really caring about Candy Crush or about Pokemon Go or about things that people kind of roll their eyes at, like speak with your clicks. Like, I mean, honestly, like if we have a Pokemon Go article that blows up and then another Pokemon Go announcement happens, we're going to hit Pokemon Go. And, in the same vein, if we're covering Prey over and over or Mafia over and over or whatever it is, like we will pay attention to how well it's doing and let that determine if it's worth us running cosmetic DLC, and if it's worth us running, we'll always cover the big beats, a game announcement, a release date, things like that for kind of the things in our wheelhouse. But it's everything else. It's all the granular, if Destiny releases a new patch or a new set of patch notes that is all the balancing to their guns, we have to make that determination of like, we could just put this in our Destiny wiki, which is where kind of the hardcore Destiny players are going and they'll care about it. Or if we feel like it's significant enough or game-changing enough, we will run a news story that's Destiny's new patch completely changes shotguns, or Destiny's new patch makes fast travel easier than ever, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It again is case by case. We have definitely cut down on the volume of news stories, I think, compared to what we used to do. I think IGN back in the day was, and especially in the days with posting press releases, but I think even now, like, we've definitely cut way down on being as broad as we were because the industry has gotten so wide. And if you try, like if we had 50 more people just dedicated to news, I honestly don't think we could keep up with all the mobile releases, all the Steam releases, on top of all of the granular updates to console games. It's just too much. And so I think now we do have to pick and choose. We do it based on what we either think will do well, that our audience cares about, that we personally find interesting or that we're passionate about. Because I do think part of the power of having a platform like IGN is that we can kind of be tastemakers. We can push something and say, we really believe in this game, or we're really passionate about this game, or we're experts in this game, and here's why you should care. And our responsibility at that point is, maybe this game doesn't do well with our audience, but how do we get them to care? How do we make them interested?
So in addition to just the volume of articles, what about like the volume of words in an article? Because something that I found interesting, especially now that we do the Kind of Funny morning show, every day we just read articles like from IGN constantly, GameSpot, everybody constantly.
Stop. Whoever. There must be like 3 or 4 freelancers who write as Joe Screbbles. Just knock it off. Let them use their real names. I'm sick of this pen name.
Dude turns out a lot.
Yeah.
He's really Joe's awesome.
Oh, we know because we read his shit every day.
Yeah, I mean it's that weird. Well, I mean, sorry.
The point there is I feel like there's almost every single article, especially when I'm reading them, I start reading through it. I'm just like kind of in robot mode where I'm like, and this happened, this happened, this happened. And I get to that part where I'm like, oh, no, this stuff doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, that's
right?
like the below the fold. Like, I think we get to that point where, so I'm personally a proponent of small, short stories. Just get the facts out, maybe a little bit of context about why we care. Like something like Final Fantasy 15 or The Last Guardian getting a release date. I don't think it's inappropriate to be like, this is a long time coming. This game was originally announced.
Here's the context for why this matters.
Ago. Yeah.
But I'm talking more about like, there's always that final paragraph that you hit, and it's not. It's literally every site does this, where it's just like
for more on Persona 5.
And I get that they're trying to link people to other things, and that's cool. But I do feel like recently there's been a trend to just give so much information and like kind of give the Twitter version of every other article written in the last 3 weeks about whatever it is at the bottom of this news article.
I personally, when I edit stories myself, which like by virtue of meetings and event planning and stuff, I have less and less time to do. But when I edit stories myself, I cut a lot of that. I don't think that always needs to be there, unless it's something like a really confusing ongoing story, like, or not even confusing, but like the Facebook and ZeniMax lawsuit over Oculus, or like back when 38 Studios was going on, or THQ. When something is very, or Kojima with Konami, stuff like that, where it's very clearly a part of an ongoing story.
There's context.
I think it is essential to do all those backlinks to like, kind of, if you're just joining us, here's what's happened up till now. Because I think otherwise you don't understand why this story matters. Like Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy release date announced, no, you probably don't need 30 paragraphs of context afterwards because people get it. Hey, this is a product. It's coming out on this day on these systems. But I think when it's more complicated than that, when it's something like how something affects the industry or a person leaving a company, like Peter Moore leaving EA, like spending time on his background and legacy and the fact that he, what he did before that and all of that, like that stuff I do think enriches the story and is fine. I just think it's hit or miss or it's kind of case by case. My biggest, like if you are applying to be a freelancer with us specifically, I think my biggest pet peeve is when someone nails the information about a show. So they're like, oh, The Flash is renewed for season 3 and blah, blah, blah. And they get all of the important stuff right. And then they have this context section where they screw up, where it's like in the bottom half of the story, they're like, The Flash is the first ever superhero show to appear in the CW. It's like, well, no, Arrow came first. Like, I feel like the context is where people get into trouble, is trying to go back and look at Wikipedia or whatever it is to act like you're an expert. And so my feedback for news writers, at least for us, is if you know it, if you have been following this story, feel free to link back. But I don't see it as necessarily essential.
Are contractors or anyone incentivized by like word count?
No, not for us. I do think that there's we will pay a better rate if we're talking about original news and stuff. If someone brings us an opportunity or a scoop, or if they secure an interview themselves and then want to offer it to us to publish, like we'll give more for that than we would for just, hey, can you write up this PS blog post or whatever it is. So in that way it's incentivized, but we don't have a minimum or maximum for our writers, and we don't really do. A lot of sites will run stories at specific times, so it's like there's a 3:00 slot, a 3:30 slot, a 4:00, and they'll space out news that way. We tend to do it more as it's we'll publish it as it's written, basically, which I think can give the kind of discovery problem of, hey, our front page is 30 news stories at once. If everything, the Game of Thrones trailer happening at the same time as the Destiny trailer last week is a perfect example of 2 major high priority things happening at once. With those happening, there's no way we're also going to write about, the DLC drop for Mafia 3 or whatever it is. And that's the point where we kind of do have to prioritize what goes on the site right now and what can wait.
What's up, party people? If you like that content, subscribe by clicking here to Kind of Funny Games. Or if you want content that's not games related, subscribe by clicking there. If you want to support us on Patreon, boom, right there. Other stuff too, I'm limited to 20 seconds for this. Till next week, I'll see you later.